Everyone, welcome back to this Python tutorial, start of this tutorial. So we saw like how to start off with Python, how to do some basic methods, call some, print some values, do some additions. We saw some arithmetic functions, then we saw some text functions, string functions. So now let's proceed. So now in this one, what we are going to do is we are going to look at what are functions and methods. Like so far we were writing this simple code on the prompt, right? So now if you saw the video demo, we saw that we were writing against the prompt, but now actually all the class typically in your all the code in your Python in real-time applications will be inside a Python file .py file. Either they'll be free form, like they will get there'll be a series of lines of code, or they will be inside functions or methods, or you will be creating modules. And you can also create classes, as it is an object oriented language, and you have concept of inheritance and all that. So all that we will see. So functions, basically what are they? These sections you'll learn how to make functions and methods. See, you will write a function like any other. You'll say def function name and arguments, and with indent you'll write the code that you want within the method or function. Okay, and then if you have a return value, you'll specify the return value here. Unlike other methods, you don't need to specify the return data type over here. Okay, so this makes functions much easier in Python. May always remember that you have to make an indent after the def statement for your code block. The same thing of indentation also applies for if, while, try. We'll see that in the control flow. Okay. So you'll be using get def keyword to create a function. All this is again covered in the video demo after this. Each of these slides is supported by a complete demo of all the topics that are there. So please go through that once we are done with the slide. So moving on with functions. So you can pass parameters. How do you pass parameter? You will say define function name, and you will just say X. You will not again difference from other languages, or you will not define the data type. Says Python will detect the data type. Also, return value is not mandatory, not always required. Now, single or multiple params can be passed here. That is important. Either you can pass single or. Now, if you have an unknown number of arguments, it can also be passed as star args. Okay, so this is one way, and then you can use the index to access the values. Now, suppose you don't know how many parameters are going to be passed, so you can give star x, and then using the index x0, x1, x2, x3, you can access it as an array. Okay. Also, Python you can do function recursion. That is, this method can call, function can call itself. Okay, that is called recursion. Whenever a function calls itself, it's called recursion. But you need to be very careful about it, because it can form an endless loop. So there are certain conditions based on some requirements that you may have to do some recursive call. Okay. Now modules are what? We saw function, right? In real time, all code like functions are usually written in a file called py. The file is then executed as Python and the file name.py. The files can hold a function, lines of code without function, or class, anything. Your module can hold anything. You can just lines of code to execute directly. It can hold a function like this. It can hold a class. Okay. So there are while files can be without any functions. If you have a file as module, they can be imported into other modules, and these functions can be executed from other .py file. You can also have modules within fy, and you can, within the module, if you have some methods, these modules can be imported in other modules .py files, and you can execute that module.method name. So why do we create modules? See, basically you will not write all your code in one or two line of files, right? You want to create libraries, and the concept of separation of concern. Basically you will modularize the functional code into libraries. So this way, and you'll use them only when required. You'll import the module only when required and execute them. This also helps in better management of code. Yeah. So modularization helps you to create libraries, and you can use it as and when required. Now suppose you want to create a class. Now you have an object oriented files with class. Now a Python file can have a class. As we know, Python is an object oriented class language. You can have a class. The class can hold methods and properties, and which can be called by instantiating a class. It can have methods as well as members, right? Members can be methods or private variables, public variables also. So basically, you can also have a method in it which will fire on invoking the class like a constructor. Now, if you see here, now this is a class definition. You say class name. Then if you want to define a constructor which will always fire, you say define underscore init underscore underscore. So this is a reserved word, okay? So for if you want to call a constructor, you have to write it like init. And mandatory, you have to give self as a parameter. Any method inside a class, okay? Let me repeat, any method inside a class should always have a default parameter self. Alright? So this class has got two methods. One is a constructor here and one is a method over here. Okay? This constructor will fire every time the class is inherited. The class is created, sorry. So how do we invoke a class? First instantiate the class and use the object. So here if you see we have a first class, right? So how do we invoke? We say x equal to first class. The moment you run this, your init method will run if you have an init method. Otherwise the object will get created. And any object property method like say x.test that we have here can be executed. Now what you can do is this module can be, which holds the class, can be imported, another module and methods can be invoked. Class itself cannot be initialized in the same, okay? Now we have a complete detailed class demo like for all the file modules and all. So once you finish the slide, what I suggest is go to that particular section and look at the complete demo over there of how to create a class and how to use a class. There's a complete tutorial there. Now what is inheritance? Now inheritance is like, one class can extend another class. Now when you come into this session, it is expected that you know a little bit of object oriented programming. So now how do we extend? Usually in Java and other language we say classes extends the class parent class, right? So here it is not like that. You say class name, and within the brackets you will give the name of the class you want to extend. Okay, so if class 8 is the parent class and if you want to extend, you say class 7. Within brackets you will say class 8. Now if you see here, now this is the parent class we are defining. In the parent class we have an init which says invoke constructor and define parent class method. So this is your parent class, and let's see the child class here, which is, so child class here is again having a constructor. And now see here what is happening. We say class 8 init, yeah? So when we say class 8 init, what is happening is it is calling the parent class constructors. First the child constructor will run and then the parent constructor method will run. Now we also have a method one here. Again, as I told you, all class methods should have self parameter passed. So here it prints, and now it will print the child method. Now the concept of overriding is, now if you extend this class, now if you see a method 1 is there, right, in parent class 8, you can write the same signature 1 in the child class also. So if you write that, the child class method will run. Okay, if you say class 7 x equal to class 7, if you say x equal to method 1, child class will run. But if you want to invoke the parent class method, you'll have to say super.method. Very simple. You say super.method1, it will go here, check that okay, class 8 is extended. Let's see if we have a method here, and it will execute the parent class. So this is how we have overriding and inheritance implemented in Python. So let me repeat here. By default, it will be running the child constructor. Now class 8.init is you're calling the parent constructor over. Okay. Look at the complete demo in the class. Then we can proceed further. So this module we covered what are functions, modules, class and inheritance. This is the same thing which will be used in different ways. Very important basic tutorial. Please go through it and understand it thoroughly, especially the demo part.